Today we have for our SOW Network segment on Black crime, or I should say quote unquote Black crime, we have Chief James Berry Wright, who's a retired police chief and a lifelong resident of Miami, Florida, someone I've known for a number of years and hold in very high esteem. He is also the founder of Wright Worldwide Inc. And he's just a dynamic person, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing his sentiments on the topic. How are you doing, Chief Wright?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany. It's a pleasure to be here to participate and to give your listening audience, our listening audience, an opportunity to learn about different social dynamics that's affecting our community today.
Exactly. So let's just jump in, because with all the information and the heartbreak that people are experiencing right now about the George Floyd incident and then incidences that have occurred after that, a lot of our attention has been taken away from what people call Black on Black crime. I know that I've talked to you about Black on Black crime before, but you have a different take on it. Can you share with me what do you consider is Black on Black crime?
Well, the reality is often we hear that statement, Black on Black crime. You'll often hear as well people that are non-Black, if you will, include that into our current political era, but people like to really add that into the conversation when it comes to police misconduct, excessive force. And what I often hear my non-Black friends say, oh, you're complaining about police brutality, but why aren't you complaining about Black on Black crime? And they always look to Chicago to really expound or try to push home that event. The reality is that most crimes within ethnic groups are not a phenomenon. So what happens is, because we are of African American descent, the majority of people that that we hang around, not all, but the majority of people that we hang around is people in our other ethnic group, in our own ethnic group, I'm sorry. And so when you look at statistics, you'll see that that the ratios and the percentages of Black on Black crime is no different than quote unquote white on white crime or Hispanic on Hispanic crime. I think to a large degree why that is really in the forefront of our minds is because that is what the media portrays. That's what gives ratings, and that's what sells that particular TV station. And so the media plays a very important part in influencing our public perception, not only about Black on Black crime, but what they want to feed us. So we've got to be, responsible, and we've got to make sure that everything that's put on our plate, we don't necessarily have to eat.
I appreciate that sentiment. Now, I wanted to ask you, because I know that you have been in a lot of communities when you were, in the police field. And I wanted to ask you, in those communities, what differences have you seen when it came to the crime? Because I know you just mentioned that Black on Black crime, and then there's Hispanic on Hispanic and white on white crime. What differences when it came to the amount of crime, or because I know that everybody just believes that Black people are just doing this to each other, and because we're of African descent, we may think that that is indeed the only crime that's going on. I know this past weekend in Brownsville, you may have heard about someone shot up a graduation party. And so we hear these things and they're in the forefront of the media. So it sounds like it's just us. But what have been your experiences in different communities?
Well, let's talk about our communities first. Most of a great percentage of our communities are within the inner city. There are things that are associated with inner city life. I am a firm believer, and I'm speaking specifically from a law enforcement perspective, is that crime and poverty are inextricably joined at the hip. And so you cannot, as a law enforcement agency, really address one without addressing the other. Now, the law enforcement is not responsible for, to a large degree, social issues, but they do have a say, a voice, and an impact. And that requires law enforcement agencies to work very close with the community to get the community to assist law enforcement in resolving some of these systemic problems that plague our urban communities. The other issue is that we've got to hold elected officials responsible, those that represent those particular areas. I believe that is important. Oftentimes, we elect people, specifically our leaders, African American leaders, not really on a large degree of their plan, um, uh, substance that they bring to the table. We really elect people based upon personality. And then when we do that, these individuals don't have a real plan for our communities and how to move the needle forward. So what ends up happening is they get into office based upon personality because I like this person, I know this person, but I don't believe that we educate ourselves enough to ask those deep and probative questions as to what their platform is and how they are going to improve that particular community by their service in the elected position. The other thing that is not foreign to us is the systemic issues that have been placed as a wall, if you will, around our communities. My undergrad and my graduate degree is in public administration. And so, but public administration covers a very wide range of things, from public planning to policy to how communities are built. And so, for instance, when you make a decision, a community is supposed to be built upon a couple of things. Number one, the number one thing is that everything that you need should be in that community, and it should be accessible, and it should be so close to where you purchase your home that you don't have to leave that community for anything. Why don't our communities look like that? I'll tell you why. So let me go back to my first point, and that is the community that I live in now. Within a 2-mile radius, there are at least 3 public supermarkets. There are at least 4 to 5 dry cleaners. There are enough gas stations, YMCA, pools, parks, whatever you need. I don't have to drive 5 miles outside of my community for anything that I need, and that's the way it should be. Now, when you look at that template and you look at our communities, one of the reasons that we remain in economic inequity is because the dollar does not circulate in our community really more than a day. I would say six hours. So when I lived in the city of Miami Gardens, let's use that as an example. There are no movie theaters, no performing arts centers, nothing geared toward family activities, with the exception of maybe the local parks. And so the question is, why is that? That's an important question to ask. So what that means is, while I get my haircut in the city of Miami Gardens, I buy gas in the city of Miami Gardens. And my business is in the city of Miami Gardens, but traditionally, if we want to go shopping, we have to go to Aventura Mall. We have to go someplace outside of our community. Where can I bring my family from out of town to have a nice sit down dinner at a local Black owned restaurant with the level of excellence and service that we're used to? There is none. So these kinds of things cause us to have to go outside of our community where our dollars are being spent, Tiffany, outside, and it is not consistently generating the amount of the amount of income that is occurring in our cities. So in a traditional African American community, you're going to find an overabundance of beauty supply places. You may find several tattoo places and things that really don't contribute to our economic equality as opposed to inequality. So several years ago, and I haven't asked them for a recent study, I asked the Beacon Council, which is a economic arm funded by the Board of County Commissioners, Miami-Dade. Their primary job is to provide and attract businesses, Fortune 100, 200, 500 companies into Miami-Dade County. And so I pulled the stats for the city of Miami Gardens at this particular time, and I was amazed at what the statistics said. Now, I don't want anybody to that's going to hear this or view this later that I'm picking on Miami Gardens. I'm not. It's just a city that I grew up in, spent a considerable amount of time there before it was incorporated. So our neighborhoods have changed, and I'm just focusing on that particular city. So, and I would venture to say that if I looked at, if I asked the Beacon Council for stats for Brown Sub, Liberty City, maybe some aspects of Richmond Heights and Little Haiti or some other areas, I would venture to say that the stats are probably going to be almost the same with some variations. So what I found is, and this is from memory, that we spent, and this is per household, somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 a month on beauty, beauty supplies, those kinds of things. When we looked at education and books, those numbers were very, 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 very low. So it gives you a snapshot of the statistics of that particular community. So anybody has the ability, to go to the reach out to the Beacon Council and look for stats for their particular community, and it's very comprehensive. It talks about the education, how many people have high school diplomas versus bachelor degrees, PhDs, master degrees. Tells you about the median age for that particular city. It provides a lot of information for you to begin really to to better the community as an individual, and it also gives you a snapshot of whether or not you want to invest in that community, and what enterprises or industries will cause you to be successful based upon those stats. So for instance, based upon eating habits, in most inner city communities, you may not fare very well. I'm not saying that you won't. It would probably take you to, really have to build your business up and marketing on a consistent basis. With respect to me wanting to bring either a vegan restaurant or a healthy eating establishment that's low on calories, low on the traditional foods that, that we eat. So I believe that all of these things are vitally important. I'm just going to put this out now. I've connected with a health organization that has a very successful health clinic and health clinics in the Jacksonville, Florida area. And what we have identified is that there are a number of health clinics outside the city of Opelika, but we've only identified, I believe, one clinic that is in the city of Opelika, which is Dr. Kramer. He's been there probably 30 plus years, maybe even more. But there are no clinics to provide education for our residents that live in that city. And so what we're endeavoring to do is to get financing to establish a clinic in the city of Opelika off of the 27th Avenue corridor. And our hope is within 6 months of the ribbon cutting for that clinic, that we will then move to Overtown. So this is not going to be a regular clinic where you come in and you're seen. We are going to be providing transportation for those that live within the city and outside as well. But we believe that it is important to extend and educate people so that we can live longer and live healthier and more wholesome lives. We're going to have a nutritionist there. We're going to have nutrition classes, teaching people how to, how to eat better. We're going to have an activities coordinator. There is going to be a gym, a full gym on site, and those kinds of things, because we're not really concerned about a profit, if you will, just having a clinic because there's a need for one and then sending people home. This is a holistic approach. And we believe that if we can get the community to buy in to change habits, that our life expectancy in the long run will increase.
Okay, so all of what you said is very, very interesting, and it's going to help me because I want to put some links on the bottom of this video. So I'm going to add the Beacon Council so people can be familiarized with that.
Sure.
I hadn't heard of it in a while, so I sort of, forgot about it. There's something called Eat Right for Your Blood Type.
Yes.
And it gives you a chart. And I myself have a veganish diet because I just started eating fish again, but I'm going to put that on there. Now, what you're talking about and what I wanted were some solutions. And I appreciate that because these all tie into that. Black economics. I know that when I was much younger and growing up in Cleveland, we had Jawaza Kunjufu come, and I learned early that what you were saying was true, and it still exists, amazingly, that when we get money in our hands, we turn it over to other communities very quickly. Now, in regards to you talking about the clinics, that touches my heart because my master's is in public health, and I try to stay abreast of health issues and stuff. But I noticed that you mentioned Opelika and you also mentioned Overtown, and I know that you were the chief of police in Opelika. Do you hold this particular city dear to your heart, and why?
Opelika, I do. Opelika has so much potential, and when I talk about the city, I really tell people that it is really Opelika and the city of Miami Gardens, that Opelika is really what I consider to be the last frontier. The last frontier from the standpoint of the city could be doing much, much better financially if they really had some thought leadership. I won't disclose his name, but I will say that in the last election for governor, one of the candidates and I were having a conversation, a local elected official here. So if you're smart, you should be able to figure um, out who that individual was. We were having a conversation, and the individual said, if I had the opportunity to be mayor again, if I could, I would love to be the mayor of Opelika. And this is what the individual explained to me. First off, the city is a very small city, roughly about 16, 17,000 people now. Half of the city's about 4.2 square miles, and it is half of the city is really industrial. And so one of the reasons that the city has not really been able to attract the type of businesses that that they really should be attracting is because of a lack of finances, and I'll just put it that way. So it is strategically located, not far from the Gratney, easy access to 820, 826, the Turnpike, all of these major thoroughfares that would allow for very large storage facilities and capacities, increased revenue for the police department to add more officers. And I'm not saying that the city currently doesn't have enough officers. Neither am I saying that by hiring more officers, some of the conditions that exist there will go away, and that is not the case. It's not the case for Opelika or for any other city. Most people tend to think that if we hire more police officers, then crime will go down. No, it is engaging the community and making sure that you're writing your own stories begins to change the dynamics of that city. So I mean, it just has so much potential. When I served as the police chief from 2005 to 2008, I said to myself, if I had an opportunity to be a leader in that city, when I say a leader, I'm talking about from an elected standpoint, I would do a public-private partnership, get a developer to buy up, for instance, the Triangle area, buy up the entire Triangle area, give those individuals money for their property. I would have mixed use, affordable housing and mixed use housing in there. Being that, and when I use that term, I'm talking about low income, moderate income, and upper income. And you're saying to yourself, man, if I had money, why would I want to live in Opelika? Well, because I would make it conducive for you to live there. You leave your property and you come out on 22nd Avenue, you make a left turn, you're on State Road 9, and within 5 minutes you're on 95 or the Turnpike. And so what I kind of envision for that particular area is a single family homes, townhomes, several different parks on the corner, almost a similar design that the town of Miami Lakes has before it was incorporated. Cleaners. I believe that I would be able to get places like Publix and other places to develop a very small scale, Publix, not as large as we normally see, but something on a smaller basis, in a strip mall format. Cleaners and everything else that I talked about at the beginning of our conversation about not having to leave that community. We'd have it gated. We'd have 2 entrances, one for visitors and residents, another on 151st Street for residents only. And I would make that a prototype for that community. And then once we were successful in doing that, I would then move to the west side of the city, where we have still have old barracks from when the city was an army city, and develop the same thing on the other side of the city. And one of the things that we have to realize is that people want to invest. People want to invest where they feel safe. So from a law enforcement perspective, it's important not only for you to reduce crime in a particular city or area, but you also have to reduce the fear of crime. So going back to the clinic situation, what we have found out in our survey is the reason that a number of clinics are outside the city, but they come in to pick up people to take to their facilities, is they are afraid to come into the city. So it's an issue that we're going to have to overcome, but it's something that's already been done. And I love the city. From time to time, either individuals from the police department or elected leadership continue to call me and ask me for input regarding crime and safety issues or other issues in the city. So just because I left, they still recognize the good work, according to them, that I did when I worked there as the police chief, and according to them, they still hold me in high regard. There's so much that can be done in that city from a standpoint of beautification and really engaging the people in that community. And so the very last thing that I want to say is the people in that community are at a point where apathy has really set in. And so there's a lack of trust with elected leadership because of continual, mismanagement of public dollars. And, the same people that show up to council meetings, to commission meetings are the same people that voice their concerns. And that is not even 1% of the of that city. The great thing is that you've got new leadership. You've got a very young mayor. You've got a very young vice mayor. And I believe that the tide is turning now. I just really don't know how much time they have, because the city has term limits with respect to how long individuals can serve in that capacity. And it's 8 years. So in politics, really you are, really spending your first, 2 years, if you will, first 2 to 3 years, learning the political system and the ins and outs of a particular city, getting comfortable with your colleagues. Your third year in office, you're beginning to campaign to run for a second term in your third year, and then you are on the campaign trail the fourth year. So the reality is that when you first get elected, your first 2 years, you're educating yourself on how you can improve systems and processes, and then all that you've learned in your first term, if you get elected the second term, then you begin to implement and move from what I call from conversation to content.
I can recall when I relocated to Miami, Opelika was like the first place I stayed, I think, because I was at Florida Memorial College, and we were at that time in Opelika. And their mayor, I remember him mentoring to my son through 100 Black men of South Florida. So I'm glad that's working out for him, but I appreciate your breakdown. But before we go, I want you to give me, if you can, 3 words that describe what we need to do or where we need to go to get to that, to bring that all together with the crime and the producing the health clinics and having the accessibility that you spoke of. What 3 words could you leave us with?
Tiffany, that's a great question. And I'm going to take the easy way out, and I'll use one word, 3 times. And it really boils down to relationships. It really boils down to relationships. Relationships, in my opinion, are the best thing that anybody can have. If you have relationships with people, you don't necessarily need money. But if you need money, those relationships are going to help you secure money that you need for whatever your cause is. And here's an example. Former Congressman Kendrick Meek and I grew up in law enforcement. He was a trooper. I was a young patrol officer in the city, in Liberty City, where he grew up. As a matter of fact, how we met was we met at a convenience store off of 62nd Street and 23rd Avenue. We both went in to get something to drink. I was coming out of the store. He was coming in the store. Another young brother. And, I went out of my way to speak to him. We started talking. And so from there, the relationship developed. When I took over the reins of the police department, Opelika Police Department, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement had outlined about 203 inefficiencies that they saw in the police department, that when I left in 2008, I'd resolved all of those issues. So one of the things that I was coming into work one morning, and I saw one of the officers was a little bit, I guess, down because he was having problems with his vehicle. So I asked him how many miles did the vehicle have on it. I think he told me it had something like 195,000 miles. Well, that's unheard of, because I came from a larger police agency, Miami-Dade Police, where our vehicles were in service either 5 years or 100,000 miles, whichever came first. And then we auction those off. And so that was very disheartening to me. And I said, I've got to buy new vehicles, but I don't have any money. So what I did was I reached out to Congressman Meek at the time, and I told him what my plans were. I needed to, upgrade the vehicles, just a whole bunch of stuff that I need to upgrade when I was there. So he eventually called me back and he said, I have good news and I have bad news. And what do you want to hear what do you want to hear first? I said, well, give me the good news first. He said, the good news is that you currently have a grant for $269,000 that has been sitting on the books accessible to the police department for the last 4 years. They haven't spent the money, and you've got 2 weeks to spend it. I said, well, I'm not going to be able to spend $269,000 in 2 weeks. He said, well, the bad news is that it is not budgetary money, it's political money. So he said, if you don't spend it in 2 weeks, we're gonna take the money back. And then he said, you also have another pot of money that you've had for 3 years, and you've got a month to spend that. And so what we ended up doing was I took the money I already had. He was able to secure another $100,000 for me for a records management system, and I put all of that money together, and we made it work. And so when I say the key to getting anything done is relationship, had I not had that relationship with him, I really didn't have. The only other person I had a personal relationship with was Congressman Alcee Hastings. However, he didn't represent the city of Opelika. Kendrick did, and so we were able to do that. Secondly, because of my relationship with the governor at the time, Charlie Crist, I'd previously served on his when he was the Attorney General, his public policy council. where he had gathered top leaders across the state to advise him on how certain laws affected Floridians. And as a result of that relationship, when he made a decision to run for governor, his through his staff, they asked me to serve on this transition team. So I served on the transition team for the Department of Corrections, and you know, in that capacity, what we were able to do with doing interviews with both local and leaders in Tallahassee, what the needs were, what was working, what wasn't working, and then that way we're able to provide the governor and lieutenant governor strategic information so that they could make you know, policy decisions. And as a result of that relationship, because I was the chief of police, the city was in the predicament that they're in now, which is they were in financial oversight. But because of that relationship, because of the relationship I had with the governor, we were able to get the city out of financial oversight. I think it was a year and a half or two, almost 2 years, that they came out early. So relationships are key. When you look at the city of Minneapolis, CNN goes in and they are reporting about issues that are going on in the city. And many of us may not have caught this, but what happened was there were two reporters out there. There was a white reporter and there was a black reporter. And apparently tensions were high. One of the law enforcement individuals, you know, kept telling them, okay, you can't stand here, you need. So he was just simply asking, hey, where would you like us to film from? The next thing we know, he's in handcuffs. The governor, during one of his press conferences, talked about those kinds of issues. And what was important to me was that the president from CNN called the governor to say, hey, what are you doing? And by that one phone call, not only did they release the CNN reporter, but they dropped the charges. So why is that important? Because money answers all things pertaining to life. So how many of our local leaders are developing relationships with bankers and financiers and organizations who have access to money that they've gotten from the federal government to meet needs in our particular city where we don't have the money in our budget? How can I gain access to capital to forward my agenda, but I don't have money? You have to come up with creative ways to do that. And you can have all the creativity you want to. If you don't have relationship with key people in this community that can move the needle for you, you're not going to be able to accomplish much. So we talked about law enforcement. We talked about you know, economic disparity, and I haven't because I've been busy. I haven't seen this really in a while. But one of the things that is equally important as it relates to access to capital, as you will, just think about this for instance. Let's say you wanted to grow your city, right? And you wanted to grow the small businesses because small businesses make up the majority of all the businesses in the U.S. So we have a lot of people in our community who have the talent and the skill to produce a product, but they don't have the business acumen to grow and scale the community. I mean, the business, and they're not educated. Some are not educated about you know, taxes and all of these things, so they can cook good. The food is good, but when you go there, the service isn't great. So what if, you know, you as a visionary and progressive mayor said, you know, this is what I want to do. I don't want it coming out of the taxpayers' dollars. I don't want it coming out of the budget. I'm going to access some capital, and I'm going to create a program for a 6-series program, if you will, to better educate the businesses that we already have in our community, and for those that desire to start businesses. Let us show you how to do it. You know, it's funny, not funny, but in a comical way. I've asked a number of people who have advertised their business, and I said, "Oh, is your business incorporated with the state of Florida? Do you have a local business tax receipt from Miami-Dade County and the city in which your business operates in?" "Oh, no. Is your business incorporated?" "No." "Well, you got a hobby. You don't have a business." So by doing that, in my opinion, I believe that you can help people grow their business legacy for their family. You can further educate them how to operate professionally, and get testimonials on how your local government, government official assisted you and bringing you from the place where you are now to some other place. I like food. I like to eat. I like watching Guy Fieri on the Food Network. And of all those establishments that he goes to, when he comes back, there is always exponential growth that has occurred when their particular establishment was showed. So closing with this economic piece, the Federal Reserve Bank, I can't remember when the last time they did one, but they publish an article and articles relative to access to capital for urban communities. That's a nice way of saying Black communities. And they do studies across the U.S. with respect to the poor cities. The last one I read may have been, I don't know, 2014, 2016, I'm not sure. And it talks about the economics in that community and just the whole piece. So if you or your listeners can get your hands on it, it kind of gives you a snapshot of each of those cities where they have done a study with respect to those communities having access to capital and all of those things. So you asked me about law enforcement, economics, and what was the last thing? I apologize.
Economics. I asked you about Opa-locka. I don't know because we talked about the food. You gave me the 3 points, and your thing was on relationships, right?
Yes. So let me close with let me close with the last word and piece. Community. You've got to be involved in your community as a taxpayer, and even as a non-taxpayer. Even if you're renting in that community, that should not stop you from educating yourself on how things work in your community. A lot of us, I find, want to go to people who they perceive to be leaders and ask questions that they have the ability to go to a council meeting, to confront those leaders and ask them why. Yet what they do is they call leaders that they believe are leaders and people who have influence, and they ask them, well, why is this occurring? And my question and other people's questions are, why don't you ask? Why are you asking me to provide information as to why a particular commissioner or council member, or as a legislative body, why they made a particular decision? And I find out that a lot of people are so focused on the presidency and Donald Trump, when the reality is that all politics are local, and who the president of the United States is less important to me than individuals where I live locally that have the power to raise property taxes, either the school board or your local elected officials, those are things that you need to be concerned about. How often is your trash picked up? Why wasn't your trash picked up today? Rather than talking to your neighbor about it, or just saying, oh, the garbage didn't get picked up today. Call 311. Hey, this is my address. I'd like to know why it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and my garbage has not been picked up. That's simple stuff. So, we need to be engaged in our community. We need to hold elected officials accountable, and we are responsible for our own outcomes. And that means when I started going back to the gym at a certain point in time, I didn't think that the particular trainer that I had was really pushing me. So I felt I was throwing my money away. So I asked them for another trainer. And what I found is that there was nothing wrong with the first trainer that I had. I wasn't putting forth maximum energy. I was staying up late at night, 1 o'clock, my regular time. I wasn't getting a proper rest. So then I got up in the morning tired. When I went to the gym at 8 o'clock, 8:30, these high intensity exercises, lifting weights and running and time. I mean, I didn't have anything. And my trainer said, hey, listen, you're wasting my time. I can be training somebody else. Come on, man, put the work in. And so what we do is we expect other people really to carry our weight when we should be carrying our own weight. And that means that we're responsible for our own outcomes. Be involved in your community. If you live in unincorporated Miami-Dade County, you want to know what's going on in your community with the police department, find out when the Citizens Advisory Committee is being held at your substation. And go. You don't have to pay anything. It is one way of you putting the police department on notice that these things are occurring in your community, because the police department doesn't know everything. We rely heavily upon our citizens to let us know what's going on in the community. And you develop relationships with those people. You know how many times people in communities that I worked in, Liberty City, Lincoln Fields apartments, allowed me and my staff to come in there undercover and film drug operations. Just because you live in low-income housing does not necessarily mean that you got to put up with the conditions that occur in low-income housing. So those people are there not necessarily because they want to be, maybe they got a divorce or something else happened, but it doesn't matter. So, they are people in communities are more concerned than I think sometimes law enforcement believes, but you gotta engage people. And human capital is the currency of the world that we live in. You gotta connect with people.
Chief, you mentioned, and I didn't get the name of the organization, but it did the economic, it did the studies on the economic accessibility in different areas.
Well, it's not only economic.
Was it an agency or?
No, it's the Beacon Council.
Oh, that was still the Beacon Council. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this has taken a very refreshing turn, and I appreciate all of your input. I got a lot of notes to work with. I do agree with what you said about relationships. I teach people all the time that relationships are everywhere, whether it's going to the cleaners or going to the supermarket or going to church, and we need to look at everybody as a resource.
Right.
And because we miss out on a lot of things. So I just want to thank you once again for joining us. I hold you in very high esteem over the years.
Thank you so much.
I
You
appreciate
as well.
you always standing up for what is right and making a difference.
Thank you
and
so
this
much.
Interview shows you're very welcome. It shows that you have just continued with this lifelong service, and I just find it a blessing just to know you.